Can a lead of just 15 horsepower define a world championship? What if that advantage was perfectly legal, but completely immoral in the eyes of rivals? What you're about to discover isn't just a technical trap, it's an engineering masterclass that has put the FIA on the ropes. Today I reveal to you how Mercedes found the biggest loophole in modern F1 and why the FIA could be forced to rewrite the regulations before the first green light in 2026. Subscribe to continue uploading more of this type of content now if we continue. What seemed to be a simple winter of technical preparation in Formula One ended up becoming the trigger for one of the most complex and divisive wars that the FIA has had to face in its recent history. The usual calm that precedes the start of a new season was abruptly interrupted by a leak, at first timid and then explosive, that shook the team offices, the technical forums, the FIA offices, and the specialized press at a global level. It was not a rumor of signings or commercial alliances. It was the heart of the new 2026 engine regulations that had been violated. And the perpetrator of the scandal had a first and last name: Mercedes high-performance powertrains. During December 2025, engineers and technical directors of several teams began to exchange alarming messages after the first private meetings between manufacturers and the FIA. Something didn't add up. The data obtained from the test benches showed that one of the engines had significantly higher performance than the rest, without exceeding the limits established in maximum power or breaking any parameter prohibited by the regulations. This anomaly set off all the alarms. If it was legal, then the rest of the manufacturers were at a clear disadvantage. And if it wasn't, then the FIA had to act immediately. The suspect's name soon came to light: Mercedes. Preliminary reports indicated a difference of approximately 15 horsepower in favor of the German engine, which translated, depending on the track, into an advantage of up to 0.3 of a second per lap. In any other category of motorsport, that might seem like an anecdote, but in Formula One, where pole positions are defined by thousandths, those 0.3 are equivalent to a completely different category of competition. It was literally the difference between winning and disappearing from the podium. A gap so abysmal that several teams considered this to completely compromise the central promise of the new 2026 rules: technical fairness and competitive balance. And here the real political earthquake begins. The FIA had worked for more than 3 years to agree on the new power unit regulations. There were technical meetings every quarter, constant debates between engineers from Renault, Ferrari, Mercedes, Honda, Red Bull powertrains, Audi, even Cadillac, which was evaluating its entry. All of these negotiations sought something fundamental: to avoid a repetition of the unilateral dominance that Red Bull and Mercedes had in the previous decade. That is why a balance was established between the heat engine and the electrical system. That's why the compression ratio was lowered. That is why energy flows were limited. Everything was designed so that performance was more level than ever. But then Mercedes, without breaking a single word of the regulations, found a way to alter that balance completely. 8T, the heart of the controversy that has the FIA in check and several manufacturers on the warpath. There's no obvious trap, no hidden illegal part, not even suspicious software. It all starts with a single line from the 2026 technical regulations for power units. An article as specific as it is seemingly harmless. C5.4.3 states that no combustion engine cylinder may exceed a compression ratio of 16.0 to 1. That figure was chosen with a clear purpose: to reduce the thermal power to allow the electrical component to have a greater role, democratizing development for new manufacturers and avoiding excesses in the search for raw power. But there is a detail hidden in plain sight that changes everything. The regulation also specifies that said measurement must be carried out with the engine off, cold, and at room temperature. And that single condition, in the hands of the Mercedes high-performance powertrains engineering team, became the basis for one of the most controversial, intelligent, and discussed developments of recent years. Unlike other manufacturers who designed their engines to adhere to the 16:1 static limit in all conditions, Mercedes took a radically different approach. Its engine, known internally as 067/6, was conceived not as a static system, but as a thermal organism. That is, an engine whose behavior and performance are not defined by its cold values, but by how its components change dimensionally under extreme temperatures. The key word is thermal expansion. This physical phenomenon is as basic as it is powerful. Any material, when subjected to heat, tends to expand, but not everyone does it the same. Some metals, such as aluminum or titanium, have very high expansion coefficients. Others, such as certain special steels or ceramic alloys, are much more stable. Mercedes, through advanced thermodynamic modeling, selected a specific combination of materials for the engine's pistons, liners, and cylinder heads, so that when heated under racing conditions, where temperatures in the combustion chamber can exceed 900 degrees Celsius, these parts will slightly modify their size, also altering the volume available in the chamber, and therefore, the effective compression ratio. It is a design that challenges the limits of conventional thinking. When cold, the engine scrupulously complies with the regulations. Each piece respects the volume, the stroke and diameter ratio, and the combustion geometry. But once on the track, with the system subjected to real operating temperatures, those dimensions change in a predictable way. The combustion chamber volume decreases just enough to increase the hot compression ratio to a value close to 18.0 to 1, which is exactly the previous limit allowed by the FIA in the previous regulations. That is to say, Mercedes did not invent a new form of cheating, but rather returned to the thermal efficiency levels of the past, only now it does so through a completely different and technically legal means. This type of architecture requires surgical precision in manufacturing. Not only must the exact thermal expansion coefficients of each material be known, but also how they interact when in direct contact, such as between the piston and the cylinder. If one expands too quickly or beyond the safe threshold, the engine risks seizing or even exploding. If you don't expand enough, you don't get the benefit of the design. To achieve this perfect balance, Mercedes had to invest in ultra-high-resolution thermal simulation technologies using CFD modeling and finite element analysis to validate each micro-tolerance adjustment. But the most controversial thing is that this engine behavior cannot be measured on a static test bench. That is, when applying the homologation tests stipulated by the FIA. Carried out in cold conditions, the engine behaves like any other. For this reason, no technical inspector can certify that during the race the engine alters its internal parameters. It is a perfect legal trap, which is only activated by heat and cannot be traced by the current measurement means of the regulation. This is what has put the FIA at a historic crossroads. Technically, there is no violation. The regulation does not prohibit thermal expansion, does not establish hot ratio limits, does not require dynamic simulations. But morally, rival teams consider it an abuse of the regulations, an exploitation that contradicts the intention of the standard, and that, if not corrected, will make Mercedes the only manufacturer capable of starting the 2026 era with a structural advantage that the others will not be able to match without completely redesigning their engines from scratch. Ferrari has been one of the first to demand a redefinition of the homologation method, requesting that new tests be introduced in real thermal conditions. Honda and Audi have joined in, warning that they cannot compete equally if hot ratio limits, or at least minimum thermal tolerances, are not introduced. Red Bull, after analyzing the Mercedes design internally, has changed its stance and also demands action. But the FIA, so far, has only issued ambiguous statements. They accept that they are evaluating the implications of the Mercedes design, but they have not confirmed whether they will change the rules, and that keeps the entire category in suspense. At its core, this controversy is a philosophical battle over what legality means in Formula One. Mercedes has shown that the border between what is legal and what is controversial is thinner than ever. They have done what no one else saw coming. They have not deceived the FIA. They have overcome it. And now the entire category must decide if it punishes innovation or if it resigns itself to running a 2026 season in which the advantage has already been decided before the first traffic light goes out. When Mercedes innovation became public, Formula One stopped talking about performance on the track and plunged into a much deeper conflict. A conflict where what is at stake is no longer a pole position, not even a championship, but the complete credibility of the FIA regulatory system. The introduction of an advantage that, although technically legal, breaks the competitive balance before the first race of the new hybrid era is held, has unleashed a storm of consequences on all possible fronts: technical, political, legal, and moral. In the offices of the main teams, the scandal was received with a mixture of disbelief and suppressed fury. Ferrari was the first to raise a formal protest, demanding that the FIA urgently redefine Article C 5.4.3, which defines the way in which the compression ratio should be measured. They were followed by Honda and Audi, who also demanded the creation of a new homologation protocol in real operational thermal conditions. In essence, these manufacturers are not simply claiming a technical fix. They are indirectly accusing the FIA of regulatory negligence, of having drafted a rule with a gap large enough for Mercedes to build its advantage on. Mercedes has shown something that is uncomfortable, that in modern Formula One, Winning is no longer just a matter of pure speed, but of knowing how to read the rules better than anyone else. It is not simply about building a more powerful engine, but about building it in a way so precise, so meticulously designed, that it exploits a regulatory loophole without needing to break it. They have done what many cannot: innovate without breaking. But is that enough to justify its advantage? Subscribe to continue uploading more of that content. Now you really think about all this.